Have you ever met someone who instantly felt like you're a kind of person, even if you just met? There's a rare quality some people possess, an almost magnetic ability to make others feel seen, understood, and valued within minutes of conversation. It's not about having the perfect smile, the most impressive credentials, or the wittiest comebacks. It's about something far more powerful, an unconscious mastery of human connection. The truth? This isn't an innate gift reserved for the lucky few. It's a learnable skill rooted in psychology, neuroscience, and observable behavioral patterns. The most captivating individuals, whether in business, love, or friendship, simply understand what most miss. Real connection isn't about performance. It's about presence. Imagine walking into any room, a networking event, a first date, a high-stakes meeting, and knowing exactly how to turn small talk into meaningful dialogue without forcing it. Make others feel fascinating without flattery. Leave every conversation with people remembering you without self-promotion. This isn't manipulation. It's the art of being authentically compelling. Chapter 1. What is attraction? The surprising truth behind human connection. The profound psychology of human attraction. Attraction is one of the most complex and deeply rooted aspects of human psychology, extending far beyond superficial qualities like physical appearance or social status. At its core, attraction emerges from a sophisticated interplay of evolutionary biology, emotional intelligence, and social dynamics that have developed over thousands of years. Our brains are wired to evaluate potential connections within milliseconds, unconsciously assessing whether someone makes us feel safe, understood, and valued. This instinctive evaluation happens beneath our conscious awareness, yet it profoundly influences who we gravitate toward in friendships, romantic relationships, and professional collaborations. The most fascinating aspect is that these judgments are rarely about objective traits. Instead, they revolve around the emotional experience we have when interacting with someone. A person who radiates warmth and authenticity will always create stronger bonds than someone who relies on status or forced charm, proving that true attraction is fundamentally about emotional resonance rather than surface-level qualities. The transformative power of psychological safety. What separates genuinely magnetic individuals from those who merely pretend at charm is their ability to foster psychological safety. The profound sense that one can be authentic without fear of judgment. Psychological safety creates an environment where people feel free to express their true thoughts, share vulnerabilities, and engage openly without self-consciousness. This concept, originally studied in workplace teams by Harvard researchers, applies equally to personal relationships. When we're around people who accept us unconditionally, listen without interrupting, and respond with empathy, our nervous systems naturally relax, lowering our defenses and opening us to deeper connection. The paradox is that this safety doesn't require perfection. In fact, people who admit small flaws or laugh at their own mistakes often become more relatable and attractive. This explains why the most charismatic leaders, partners, and friends aren't those who project invincibility, but those who balance strength with humility, creating a space where others feel safe to be themselves. The neuroscience of connection. How our brains sync in meaningful interactions. Modern neuroscience has uncovered astonishing insights into what happens in our brains during moments of real connection. Studies using fMRI scans reveal that when two people engage in deep, meaningful conversation, their brainwave patterns begin to synchronize, a phenomenon known as neural coupling. This synchronization explains why time seems to disappear during engrossing discussions, and why some interactions feel effortless while others feel strained. The most attractive people aren't necessarily the most conventionally beautiful or successful, but those who instinctively create this neural harmony through attentive presence and emotional attunement. They ask thoughtful questions, listen actively, and reflect back emotions in ways that make others feel profoundly understood. This neural mirroring is so powerful that it can even regulate emotions. When we're around someone who is calm and engaged, our own stress responses decrease, making their presence inherently soothing and appealing. This scientific perspective demystifies why we click with certain people immediately. It's not magic, but a measurable alignment of brain activity that fosters trust and connection. Cultural intelligence, the overlooked key to universal attraction. While the fundamentals of attraction are rooted in human biology, cultural context shapes how these instincts manifest in daily interactions. A behavior considered confident in one culture, such as direct eye contact in Western societies, might be perceived as aggressive in cultures where deference is valued, like Japan. Similarly, physical proximity that feels friendly in Latin America could seem intrusive in Northern Europe. However, the universal thread across all cultures is the human longing for genuine connection. We are all drawn to those who make us feel recognized and appreciated within our social framework. This is why cultural intelligence, the ability to adapt behavior while remaining authentic, is such a powerful attractor. People who take the time to understand social norms, adjust their communication style, and respect unspoken rules demonstrate a level of empathy that transcends language or background. In an increasingly globalized world, those who can navigate these nuances effortlessly become magnets for meaningful relationships, proving that attraction is as much about adaptability as it is about authenticity. The digital dilemma: how technology has rewired our capacity for connection. The rise of social media and digital communication has fundamentally altered how we experience and express attraction. While technology enables us to maintain more connections than ever before, it has also created what psychologists call connection without contentment, a state where we have hundreds of online contacts but few deeply satisfying relationships. The constant barrage of curated images and highlight reels has trained our brains to compare rather than connect, making genuine interactions feel increasingly rare. In this environment, the most attractive people are those who break through the digital noise by offering undistracted presence. Something as simple as putting away a phone during a conversation or remembering personal details about someone's life now carries extraordinary weight. The ability to be fully engaged in an age of perpetual multitasking signals that you value the person in front of you more than the endless stream of virtual stimuli. Ironically, as digital connections multiply, the human skills of deep listening and emotional availability have become rarer, and therefore more magnetic than ever before. The fundamental shift: from seeking approval to offering appreciation. The most transformative insight about attraction is that it flourishes most naturally when we stop trying to impress and start focusing on understanding. Most people approach social interactions with a hidden agenda, wondering, do they like me? Or, how can I make a good impression? But this self-consciousness actually inhibits genuine connection. The most magnetic individuals reverse this dynamic by shifting their attention outward, approaching conversations with curiosity rather than insecurity. When we replace the question, how do I get them to like me, with what can I appreciate about this person, we tap into a far more authentic and powerful form of attraction. This mindset creates a virtuous cycle. The more we focus on valuing others, the more they feel seen and appreciated in our presence, which in turn makes our company irresistibly appealing. Ultimately, the secret to lasting attraction isn't about perfecting a set of techniques, but about cultivating a sincere interest in the people around us. Because nothing is more attractive than being truly attractive to be around. Chapter 2. The Confidence Paradox: How to Be Magnetic Without Trying Too Hard. The surprising truth about confidence and attraction. Confidence is often misunderstood as something you either have or don't have, a fixed trait reserved for the lucky few born with natural charisma. But the reality is far more interesting and accessible. True confidence isn't about never feeling nervous or projecting perfection. It's about being comfortable with your imperfections. Neuroscience research shows that people are actually more drawn to those who display what psychologists call optimal confidence, enough self-assurance to be engaging, but with sufficient vulnerability to remain relatable. This delicate balance creates what we perceive as authentic magnetism. When our body language, tone of voice, and energy align in this confident but approachable sweet spot, we trigger mirror neurons in others that make them instinctively want to connect with us. The body-mind connection: how physiology shapes perception. Your physical state directly influences both how confident you feel and how confident others perceive you to be. Harvard studies demonstrate that adopting power poses for just 2 minutes can increase testosterone, the dominance hormone, by 20% while decreasing cortisol, the stress hormone, by 25%. But more subtle physiological cues have an even greater impact on attraction. The pace of your breathing, the relaxation of your facial muscles, and even the temperature of your hands send powerful subconscious signals. People who have mastered their physical presence understand that confidence isn't just mental, it's embodied. By learning to regulate your physiological state through techniques like box breathing or grounding exercises, you can project natural confidence even in high-pressure situations where you might not feel completely at ease. The likability equation: Warmth plus competence equals trust. Princeton psychologist Susan Fisk's groundbreaking research reveals that we judge everyone we meet along two primary dimensions: warmth and competence. The most attractive people score high on both. Warmth without competence comes across as needy. Competence without warmth reads as arrogant. But when you combine genuine friendliness with demonstrated capability, you create what social scientists call the golden quadrant of trust and attraction. This explains why doctors who spend an extra moment making eye contact and smiling are less likely to be sued for malpractice, and why teachers who show they care while maintaining authority inspire the most learning. The practical application: develop your skills, competence, while practicing empathy, warmth, to become irresistibly magnetic in any social or professional setting. The charisma myth: why trying too hard backfires. One of the most counterintuitive findings in attraction research is what psychologists call the law of reversed effort. The harder you try to be charismatic, the less charismatic you become. This explains why rehearsed pickup lines usually fail while spontaneous conversations succeed, and why job candidates who focus too much on impressing often underwhelm. Authentic magnetism emerges when you're fully present rather than self-conscious, when you're more interested in the interaction than in the impression you're making. UCLA studies show that people can detect inauthenticity in as little as 17 milliseconds, faster than conscious thought. The solution isn't to practice being charismatic, but to practice being engaged. When you shift your focus from "how am I coming across" to "what can I discover about this person," you bypass self-consciousness and tap into natural magnetism. Practical confidence: exercises that rewire your social brain. The 3-second rule. When entering any social situation, pause to take 3 deep breaths and set an intention to connect rather than impress. This simple reset engages your parasympathetic nervous system, reducing anxiety and increasing presence. The spotlight effect correction. Remember that people notice you far less than you think. What feels like a glaring mistake to you often goes completely unnoticed by others. Keep a journal of social interactions to prove to yourself how minor your awkward moments truly are. Progressive exposure. Build confidence gradually by starting with low-stakes interactions, chatting with baristas, before working up to more challenging scenarios, networking events. Each positive experience rewires your brain's threat response. The post-interaction review. After social encounters, focus on what went well rather than obsessing over imperfections. Our brains have a negativity bias, but consciously highlighting successes builds confidence over time. The confidence attraction cycle: how small wins create big changes. Confidence and attraction operate in a self-reinforcing cycle. As you take small steps outside your comfort zone and have positive experiences, your brain begins to categorize social situations as opportunities rather than threats. This growing confidence makes you more relaxed and authentic, which in turn makes you more attractive to others. Their positive responses then further boost your confidence, creating an upward spiral. The key is recognizing that confidence isn't the prerequisite for social success. It's the natural result of repeated positive social experiences. By focusing on progress rather than perfection, and by celebrating small victories along the way, anyone can cultivate the kind of genuine confidence that attracts others effortlessly. Chapter 3. The Art of Presence: how being fully engaged makes you irresistible. In our hyper-distracted world, the simple act of being fully present has become one of the rarest and most magnetic qualities a person can possess. True presence goes far beyond just putting away your phone or making eye contact. It's about creating a profound emotional and psychological space where the other person feels like they are the only thing that matters in that moment. Neuroscience reveals that when we give someone our undivided attention, their brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, while their amygdala, the fear center, deactivates, creating a powerful cocktail of trust and connection. This explains why people often describe magnetic individuals as making me feel truly heard for the first time. It's not that these charismatic people say extraordinary things, but that they listen and respond in ways that make others feel profoundly understood. The magic lies in what psychologists call limbic resonance, that invisible energetic exchange that happens when two people are completely attuned to each other's emotional states, creating a silent dialogue that often speaks louder than words. The most attractive people understand that presence is an active practice, not a passive state. It requires continuously bringing your wandering mind back to the present moment, especially when anxiety or distraction threatens to pull you away. They've mastered what Buddhist monks call beginner's mind, approaching each conversation with fresh curiosity rather than rehearsing responses while the other person speaks. Research from MIT's Human Dynamics Laboratory shows that the most effective communicators, whether in leadership, sales, or personal relationships, aren't those with the highest IQs or most impressive vocabularies, but those who practice attention synchrony, matching their focus and energy to the person they're engaging with. This delicate dance of presence creates what psychologists term the Michelangelo effect, where people actually become their best selves in your presence, just as Michelangelo saw his sculptures as already existing in the marble, needing only to be revealed. What makes presence so extraordinarily attractive is its scarcity in modern life. We live in an age where the average attention span has dropped below that of a goldfish, where most conversations are conducted while simultaneously scrolling through feeds, and where true listening has become an endangered art. The person who can resist these cultural currents and offer genuine presence stands out like an oasis in a desert of digital distraction. Harvard researchers found that medical doctors who gave patients their full, undistracted attention were perceived as more competent and caring, even when they spent less total time with patients than their distracted colleagues. This principle applies universally. In romantic relationships, the partner who puts down their device to truly listen creates deeper intimacy than grand gestures. In business, the leader who listens without interrupting builds more loyal teams than the most charismatic speechmaker. In friendships, being fully present for someone's story creates bonds that last decades. Presence, it turns out, is the ultimate social superpower, one that requires no special talent or advantage, just the courage to show up completely and the discipline to stay there. The beautiful paradox of presence is that it simultaneously makes you more attractive while requiring you to stop trying to be attractive. When you're fully engaged in a conversation, you're not thinking about how you're coming across, what witty thing to say next, or how to impress. You're simply there, open and receptive. This creates what psychologists call the transparency effect. People can sense your authenticity at a subconscious level, which bypasses their defenses and creates instant rapport. Studies using thin-slice judgments, where people evaluate others based on extremely brief exposures, show that we make determinations about likability and trustworthiness within the first 30 seconds of meeting someone, based largely on these subtle cues of presence and authenticity. The most magnetic people aren't those with perfect social skills, but those who've learned to quiet their inner monologue long enough to create space for real connection to emerge organically. In a world starving for genuine attention, your willingness to be truly present becomes your most irresistible quality. Chapter 4. The Language of Belonging, How to Make Anyone Feel Instantly Understood. Human connection thrives on a fundamental paradox. We're all unique individuals, yet we crave the profound sense of being deeply understood. This chapter explores the subtle art of creating what psychologists call emotional resonance, that magical feeling when someone just gets you without explanation. Neuroscience reveals this isn't just poetic language. When we feel truly understood, our brains show remarkable synchronization with the other person's neural activity. Functional MRI scans demonstrate that during moments of genuine connection, the listener's brain begins mirroring the speaker's emotional state with near-perfect fidelity, creating what researchers term a shared neural space. This biological phenomenon explains why certain conversations feel like meeting a kindred spirit. Your brains are literally dancing to the same rhythm, creating an unconscious duet of mutual understanding that bypasses intellectual analysis and speaks directly to the emotional core. The most socially magnetic individuals have mastered what linguists call attunement communication, the ability to reflect back not just someone's words, but their underlying emotional cadence. Like skilled jazz musicians improvising together, they practice emotional call and response, matching tone, pacing, and energy levels to create harmonious interaction. This goes far beyond simple active listening techniques. It's about catching the subtle emotional undertones beneath the words and reflecting them back with authenticity. When done skillfully, this creates what psychologist Carl Rogers called unconditional positive regard, where the speaker feels completely accepted exactly as they are in that moment. The magic lies in the balance. Too much mirroring feels artificial, while too little creates disconnection. The sweet spot comes when you match the emotion while adding your own genuine perspective, creating what communication experts call resonant validation. the perfect blend of understanding and individuality that makes interactions feel both comfortable and stimulating. Modern society suffers from what sociologists term an empathy deficit. We're surrounded by more people than ever before, yet genuine understanding feels increasingly rare. This explains why individuals who cultivate deep listening skills become emotional magnets in their communities. A groundbreaking Yale study found that people who asked thoughtful follow-up questions in conversations were rated as significantly more likable and competent, regardless of their physical appearance or social status. The researchers discovered that high-quality questions, those that build on previous answers and show genuine curiosity, activate the brain's reward centers in both speaker and listener. This creates a neurological feedback loop where both parties feel increasingly engaged and valued. In professional settings, managers who practice this level of attentive communication build teams with higher morale and productivity. In personal relationships, partners who master this skill create bonds that withstand life's inevitable challenges. The common thread is the powerful human need to feel received, not just heard, but truly comprehended on an emotional wavelength. Chapter 5. The Vulnerability Advantage: How Emotional Courage Creates Unshakable Bonds. The most transformative relationships, whether romantic, professional, or platonic, are built not on perfection, but on the quiet courage of emotional honesty. Vulnerability, often misunderstood as weakness, is actually the foundation of deep connection, acting as a psychological bridge that invites others to cross over and meet us in authentic space. Neuroscience reveals that when we share something genuine about ourselves, not oversharing or forced confession, but thoughtful, appropriate openness, it triggers a cascade of neurochemical responses in both speaker and listener. The brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, while simultaneously reducing activity in the amygdala, the fear center, creating a biological state ripe for trust and intimacy. This explains why those rare moments when someone says, "Actually, I struggle with that too," or "I don't have it all figured out," feel so disarming and magnetic. They signal safety, signaling that this is a person who won't judge us for our own imperfections. Yet vulnerability must be calibrated. It's not about dumping every insecurity onto someone at once, but about progressive, mutual sharing that matches the depth of the relationship. The most socially skilled individuals understand this balance intuitively, revealing just enough to create connection without overburdening the interaction. Psychologists call this the vulnerability loop. When one person takes a small emotional risk by sharing something authentic, and the other person reciprocates with their own openness, creating a virtuous cycle of deepening trust. This principle explains why first dates that include a slightly personal question, "What's something you're secretly proud of?" often lead to stronger connections than surface-level small talk, or why teams that begin meetings with personal check-ins develop more cohesion than those who dive straight into agendas. The key lies in what researcher Brené Brown terms safe vulnerability, sharing in a way that is honest but not performative, that invites reciprocity rather than demands it. In a world that often rewards curated perfection, Instagram highlights, LinkedIn success stories, the constant pressure to appear together, the willingness to be authentically human becomes revolutionary. Studies show that people who admit minor flaws or uncertainties are perceived as more trustworthy and approachable than those who project invulnerability. This beautiful mess effect, documented by social psychologists, reveals that we're drawn to others' appropriate imperfections far more than their polished facades. In leadership, managers who admit what they don't know create cultures where employees feel safe to innovate. In friendships, those who can say, "I've been feeling lonely lately," often find others responding with equal honesty, forging bonds that superficial conversations never could. The magic lies in the paradox. By having the courage to reveal where we're tender, we become stronger in our connections. Vulnerability, when wielded with discernment and emotional intelligence, transforms relationships from transactional to transformational, proving that true attraction begins not when we pretend to be flawless, but when we dare to be real. Chapter 6. The Generosity Principle: How Giving First Creates Lasting Influence. True social magnetism operates counterintuitively. The more you focus on giving rather than getting, the more attractive you become. This isn't about material gifts or performative kindness, but about a fundamental orientation toward creating value for others. Psychological research reveals that generous behavior activates the same neural reward pathways in both giver and receiver, creating a biochemical feedback loop that strengthens social bonds. When you approach interactions with a mindset of, how can I add to this person's experience, rather than what can I get from them, you trigger deep-seated reciprocity instincts that have evolved over millennia. The most influential networkers, leaders, and friends understand this implicitly. They know that small acts of thoughtful contribution, a relevant article sent without expectation, an introduction between two people who should know each other, or simply the gift of full attention, compound over time into immense social capital. What makes strategic generosity so powerful is its scarcity in today's transactional world. In an era where most social media engagement is performative and many professional relationships feel mercenary, those who consistently offer authentic value without immediate expectations stand out dramatically. Neuroscience shows that unexpected kindness creates a positive prediction error in the brain. When someone receives value they didn't explicitly ask for, it generates disproportionate goodwill. This explains why mentors who provide guidance before being asked develop such loyal protégés, or why colleagues who share credit freely build such strong alliances. The key lies in what organizational psychologists call smart generosity, giving that is specific, relevant, and mindful of boundaries, not blanket people-pleasing. A venture capitalist who makes one perfect introduction creates more impact than one who spams contacts with generic requests. A friend who remembers your obscure passion and sends a related podcast episode builds deeper connection than one who just likes every social media post. The most fascinating aspect of this principle is its long-term flywheel effect. Social science demonstrates that givers cluster at both the top and bottom of success metrics. Those who give wisely, with boundaries and discernment, ultimately outperform takers and matchers, those who keep score, in career advancement, network strength, and personal fulfillment. The difference lies in what researchers term otherish giving, generosity that considers both others' needs and one's own sustainability. This balanced approach creates what sociologists call generalized reciprocity, where your reputation for adding value precedes you, opening doors you didn't know existed. In practice, this might look like a software developer who contributes to open-source projects building unexpected career opportunities, or a community member whose thoughtful gestures create a web of goodwill that supports them during tough times. The paradox holds. By focusing less on extracting value and more on creating it, you become someone others want to help, support, and connect with, making generosity the ultimate social strategy. Chapter 7. The Curiosity Edge. How asking better questions makes you unforgettable. In an age of endless distractions and superficial interactions, the simple act of deep curiosity has become a rare superpower. The most magnetic people aren't those with the most interesting stories to tell, but those most skilled at drawing out the fascinating stories in others. Neuroscience reveals that when someone asks us a thoughtful question, our brain releases dopamine, the same pleasure chemical associated with rewards and motivation. This biological response explains why we instinctively like people who show genuine interest in us, and why the most memorable conversations are those where we felt truly heard and valued. The art of inquiry goes far beyond basic small talk. It's about creating a space where people discover things about themselves as they speak to you, where the act of being questioned helps them articulate thoughts and feelings they hadn't fully formed until that moment. The magic of powerful questioning lies in what psychologists call the intimacy ladder, the gradual progression from surface-level topics to more meaningful territory. Skilled conversationalists understand how to guide this progression naturally, matching the depth of their questions to the comfort level of the other person. A study from Harvard's Social Cognitive Neuroscience Lab found that people who asked follow-up questions, particularly those that built on previous answers, were rated as significantly more likable than those who simply moved to new topics. This depth-building approach creates what linguists term conversational entrainment, where both parties become increasingly engaged as the dialogue unfolds. The most effective networkers, therapists, and leaders all share this ability to ask questions that don't just gather information, but that help the speaker feel progressively more understood and valued. What sets master questioners apart is their ability to listen at multiple levels simultaneously. While hearing the words being spoken, they're also attuned to the emotions beneath them, the topics that light up the speaker's voice, and the subtle cues indicating where more exploration would be welcome. This multidimensional listening allows them to ask the perfect follow-up question, one that shows they've truly processed what was said while gently inviting deeper sharing. In professional settings, This skill transforms meetings from perfunctory exchanges into idea-generating sessions where team members feel their contributions matter. In personal relationships, it creates the kind of conversations where both people leave feeling energized rather than drained. The counterintuitive truth is that by focusing less on being interesting and more on being interested, you become the kind of person others describe as the most interesting conversationalist I've ever met. Practical mastery of this art begins with shifting from transactional questioning, "What do you do?" to exploratory inquiry, "What's capturing your curiosity these days?" It involves replacing generic compliments, "You're so smart," with specific observations that invite elaboration. "The way you connected those two ideas was fascinating. How did you first see that relationship?" The most powerful questions often begin with how rather than why, which can feel interrogational, and they leave space for the other person to take the conversation where they need it to go. When practiced consistently, this approach doesn't just make you more likable, it fundamentally transforms your relationships, as people come to associate you with the rewarding experience of being truly seen and understood. In a world starving for authentic connection, becoming someone who asks great questions is perhaps the most underrated way to stand out and create lasting impact. Chapter 8. The Consistency Code: How Reliability Builds Trust That Lasts. The most powerful relationships in our lives, whether personal or professional, are built on an often overlooked but essential foundation: the quiet power of consistency. Unlike charisma or charm, which spark initial interest, consistency is what transforms fleeting connections into enduring bonds. Neuroscience reveals that our brains are prediction machines, constantly assessing whether people's words match their actions over time. When someone demonstrates reliable behavior, it activates the brain's trust networks, releasing oxytocin and creating a sense of psychological safety. This explains why we feel instinctively drawn to those who follow through, the colleague who always delivers when promised, the friend who remembers birthdays without Facebook reminders, the partner whose emotional availability doesn't fluctuate with their mood. These consistent individuals create what psychologists call a secure base effect, allowing others to relax into the relationship knowing what to expect. Modern society suffers from a peculiar paradox. We're more connected than ever, yet increasingly unreliable. Flakiness has become so normalized that receiving a text saying, "running 5 minutes late," feels like a remarkable act of consideration. In this environment, simple consistency becomes extraordinary. A Harvard Business School study found that professionals rated as highly consistent in communication, meeting deadlines, and emotional availability were 47% more likely to be described as leadership material regardless of their actual position. Similarly, dating research shows that reliability is the single most predictive factor in long-term relationship satisfaction, surpassing both physical attraction and shared interests in importance. The magic lies in what behavioral economists term trust compounding. Each small act of consistency deposits emotional capital into the relationship bank account, creating reserves that sustain connections through inevitable challenges. The most fascinating aspect of consistency is its self-reinforcing nature. As we demonstrate reliability, we unconsciously shape how others perceive and interact with us. Psychologists call this behavioral confirmation. When we consistently show up a certain way, others begin to expect and respond to that version of us, which in turn makes it easier to maintain that pattern. This creates an upward spiral where our consistent actions generate consistent responses from others. The business owner who always responds to client emails within 2 hours trains clients to communicate efficiently. The parent who consistently enforces boundaries with calm authority raises children who test limits less frequently. The friend who reliably offers support during tough times creates relationships where vulnerability flows both ways. Unlike dramatic gestures that fade from memory, the steady rhythm of dependable behavior writes itself into people's subconscious, making you someone they instinctively turn to when it matters most. Mastering the art of consistency requires understanding its 3 dimensions: predictability, doing what you say you'll do; emotional steadiness, maintaining relatively stable moods and reactions; and values alignment, when your actions reflect your stated principles. Small, sustainable habits outperform grand but sporadic gestures. Sending a brief check-in text every Thursday holds more relational weight than an extravagant annual gift. The key lies in what organizational psychologists call the 90% rule. It's better to underpromise and overdeliver consistently than to make sweeping commitments you can't maintain. In practice, This might mean setting calendar reminders for important follow-ups, creating systems to track personal commitments, or simply building buffers into your time estimates. When you become someone others can set their watch by, you gain an invisible competitive advantage in every area of life. Because in a world of constant change, people cling to what and who they can count on. Chapter 9. The Emotional Echo: How to Create Lasting Impressions That Resonate. The most magnetic people understand a profound truth. Attraction isn't just about who you are in the moment. It's about how you linger in someone's memory long after the interaction ends. Neuroscientists call this the emotional echo effect, where certain experiences imprint themselves so deeply that they continue to subconsciously influence how people perceive us days, weeks, or even years later. This phenomenon explains why you might instantly recall a teacher's encouraging words from decades ago, or why a brief conversation with a stranger at a conference can shape your professional trajectory. The key lies in what memory researchers term affective salience, the brain's tendency to prioritize storing emotionally charged experiences over neutral ones. When we create moments that spark genuine curiosity, joy, or inspiration, we're not just making an impression, we're wiring ourselves into someone's neural architecture in ways that unconsciously draw them back to us. What separates fleeting interactions from unforgettable ones often comes down to what psychologists call peak end theory. Our memories disproportionately favor the emotional peaks and the conclusion of an experience. A restaurant with mediocre food but an extraordinary dessert might be remembered more fondly than one with consistently good courses. This principle applies powerfully to human connections. The colleague who ends every meeting with a thoughtful question that reframes the discussion. The friend whose goodbye hugs feel like genuine celebrations of your presence. The date who closes the evening with a perfectly timed compliment that references something personal you shared. These people understand the art of emotional punctuation. They engineer moments that resonate at the frequency of human memory, creating what sociologists term relational landmarks. Specific, vivid memories that become touchstones others use to define their entire perception of the relationship. In our age of constant interaction but rare connection, the ability to create these resonant moments has become a form of social artistry. It's why handwritten notes in a digital world carry such disproportionate weight. Why remembering someone's obscure preference. You mentioned liking lavender tea. I found some at a specialty shop. Builds more connection than generic generosity. And why shared laughter during a stressful situation bonds people more than months of smooth sailing. The most skilled connectors intentionally create what memory researchers call flashbulb moments. Experiences so distinct and emotionally textured that they fix themselves in the mind with photographic clarity. These don't require grand gestures. Often, they emerge from subtle but intentional choices, pausing a conversation to acknowledge an important insight, sending a relevant article weeks after a discussion, or introducing someone with thoughtful emphasis on their unique strengths. When you become someone who creates these emotional echoes, you transform from a passing presence into a lasting influence in people's lives. The kind of person they instinctively think of when opportunities arise or advice is needed. The neuroscience behind this process reveals an elegant symmetry. When we create positive emotional echoes for others, we simultaneously strengthen our own neural pathways for empathy and social intuition. MRI studies show that people who regularly practice creating meaningful moments for others develop heightened activity in the temporoparietal junction, the brain region associated with perspective-taking and social awareness. This creates a virtuous cycle where the more you focus on leaving others with resonant experiences, the more naturally attuned you become to recognizing and creating such opportunities. In practical terms, this might manifest as developing the habit of ending conversations with personalized acknowledgments. What I'll remember from this talk is your insight about, or training yourself to identify and amplify moments of genuine connection when they spontaneously arise. The cumulative effect is what psychologists term relational capital, a reservoir of goodwill and positive associations that continues yielding returns long after the initial investment. In a world where most interactions fade into the noise of daily life, mastering the art of the emotional echo makes you unforgettable. Chapter 10. The Flexibility Factor: The Art of Adapting Without Losing Yourself. The most socially magnetic people possess a paradoxical quality. They remain unmistakably themselves while simultaneously making others feel completely at ease. This delicate balance between authenticity and adaptability forms the core of what psychologists call social elasticity. the ability to adjust your communication style and energy to different situations without compromising your core identity. Neuroscience reveals this isn't hypocrisy, but rather advanced emotional intelligence at work. When we encounter someone new, our mirror neurons instinctively seek points of connection, and those who can find harmonious wavelengths create what researchers term neural synchrony, a state where brain activity between two people begins to align. This explains why the best conversationalists seem to meet you where you are, matching your pace when you're excited, slowing down when you're thoughtful, all while maintaining their own essential character. It's a sophisticated social dance where both parties feel simultaneously understood and uplifted. Modern psychology has dismantled the myth that authenticity means rigidly expressing yourself the same way in every situation. True authenticity is contextual. It's about expressing your core values in ways that resonate with different audiences. A groundbreaking Stanford study followed exceptionally charismatic leaders across industries and found they all shared what researchers called adaptive authenticity, the ability to translate their essential message into multiple social languages without dilution. Think of it like a master musician who can play classical, jazz, and rock while maintaining a distinctive musical voice. In practice, this might look like a CEO who communicates the same strategic vision differently to engineers versus marketing teams, or a parent who explains the same value system in age-appropriate ways to different children. The magic lies in what linguists call code switching with integrity, adjusting vocabulary, examples, and energy levels while keeping your fundamental perspective intact. The challenge in our increasingly diverse world is developing what anthropologists term cultural dexterity, the ability to navigate different social contexts with grace. This goes far beyond surface-level adjustments like clothing or slang. At its highest level, it involves recognizing and respecting different communication protocols, understanding when directness is valued over diplomacy, how silence functions differently across cultures, or how concepts like personal space vary globally. The most socially skilled individuals develop what researchers call a flexibility threshold. They adapt willingly within certain boundaries, but know when an adjustment would require compromising core values. This explains why globally influential figures like the Dalai Lama or Brené Brown can connect across wildly different audiences while remaining clearly themselves. They've mastered the art of finding universal human frequencies beneath cultural specifics. Practical development of this skill begins with what psychologists call social mindfulness, the practice of observing group dynamics before fully engaging. Like a musician tuning into a band's key before joining in, socially elastic individuals quickly assess communication norms, power structures, and emotional tones before adapting their approach. They might notice whether a group values data or stories, prefers rapid-fire dialogue or thoughtful pauses, responds better to enthusiasm or measured calm. The key distinction is that this adaptation comes from a place of generosity, meeting others where they're comfortable, rather than insecurity, changing to be liked. When done well, it creates what sociologists term the belonging sweet spot, that magical feeling of being both fully accepted and subtly elevated by an interaction. In a world that often forces false choices between being real and being polite, mastering this flexible authenticity becomes your most powerful social tool. Chapter 11. Conflict Alchemy, Transforming Tension into Deeper Connection. Human relationships inevitably encounter friction, but the most psychologically astute individuals understand that conflict, when navigated skillfully, can become the forge that strengthens bonds rather than the fire that destroys them. Neuroscience reveals that our brains process social conflict in much the same way they process physical pain, which explains why most people instinctively avoid confrontation. However, groundbreaking research from the Gottman Institute demonstrates that relationships with no conflict often lack depth and authenticity, while those that learn to disagree well develop what psychologists call secure attachment markers, higher trust, better communication, and increased resilience during tough times. The key lies in what conflict resolution experts term productive dissonance, creating just enough tension to spark growth while maintaining enough safety to prevent defensiveness. This delicate balance transforms arguments from relationship threats into intimacy-building exercises, where both parties emerge feeling more understood rather than more distant. The modern world suffers from a peculiar dichotomy. We're surrounded by performative outrage in digital spaces, yet starved for meaningful conflict resolution in our personal lives. This explains why people who can navigate disagreements with emotional intelligence become such rare and valued connectors. A longitudinal Harvard study found that professionals rated as skilled at constructive confrontation were 72% more likely to reach senior leadership positions, regardless of their technical expertise. Similarly, couples therapists report that partners who learn to fight fairly experience greater long-term satisfaction than those who claim to never argue. The magic lies in what organizational psychologists call the repair ritual, specific behaviors that prevent disagreements from causing permanent damage. These might include taking breaks when emotions run high, using humor to diffuse tension at the right moment, or developing shorthand phrases that signal goodwill. I know we're on the same team here. When mastered, these techniques create what marriage researcher John Gottman termed the positive perspective, the ability to view a partner's annoying habits as endearing quirks rather than existential threats. What separates destructive fights from relationship-building conflicts comes down to three key elements, according to neuroscience research. First is the ratio of positive to negative interactions. Stable relationships maintain at least a 5-to-1 ratio of affirming moments to conflicts. Second is what psychologists call metacommunication, talking about how you're communicating rather than just reacting. I notice we're both raising our voices. Should we pause and regroup? Third, and most crucially, is the presence of what conflict specialists term the third story, the ability to step back and describe the disagreement from a neutral perspective that both parties can recognize. In practice, this might sound like, it seems like we both want the project to succeed, but you're emphasizing speed while I'm prioritizing thoroughness. How can we honor both values? This framing creates psychological space for solutions to emerge without either person feeling defeated or dismissed. The most fascinating aspect of conflict alchemy is its transformative potential when approached with skill. Behavioral economists have identified what they call the disconfirmation bias, the tendency for people to value relationships more highly after successfully navigating disagreements together. This explains why business partnerships that survive early conflicts often outperform those that begin smoothly, and why couples who work through tough conversations frequently report deeper connection afterward. The key lies in moving from adversarial stances, me versus you, to collaborative problem solving, us versus the problem. Practical mastery begins with small steps, practicing soft startups to difficult conversations, avoiding blame-filled you statements, learning to recognize physiological signs of escalating anger, rapid breathing, clenched jaw, and developing the discipline to pause before responding. When done consistently, these practices rewire our neural pathways around conflict, transforming what once triggered fight-or-flight responses into opportunities for mutual understanding. In a world where most people either avoid conflict or escalate it destructively, becoming someone who can navigate disagreements with grace makes you irreplaceable. In business, friendship, and love. Chapter 12. The Attention Economy, becoming a rare oasis in a distracted world. In an era where the average person checks their phone 58 times per day and attention spans have dwindled to just 47 seconds on digital screens, the simple act of being fully present has become a revolutionary act. The most magnetic people understand that in today's attention economy, focused presence is the ultimate form of social currency. Neuroscience reveals that when we give someone our undivided attention, we trigger what researchers call the privileged brain network, a state where the other person's prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment and evaluation, becomes less active while their social cognition centers light up. This neural shift creates what psychologists term the spotlight effect, the sensation of being the most important person in the room, a feeling so rare and intoxicating in our fragmented world that it instantly builds deep rapport and loyalty. The tragedy of modern communication is that we're all starving to be truly heard. MIT study found that in typical conversations, people spend 60% of their time either talking or mentally rehearsing what to say next, leaving only 40% for actual listening. And of that, most is partial attention clouded by distractions. This explains why individuals who master what communication experts call deep listening stand out so dramatically. They practice what psychologists term looping, continuously checking for understanding by paraphrasing and asking clarifying questions until the speaker feels completely comprehended. Unlike passive hearing or the pretend listening most settle for, aha. Deep listening creates micro moments of profound connection that accumulate into unshakable trust. The business leader who remembers an employee's child's name and asks about the school play months later. The friend who recalls your passing comment about a job opportunity and follows up. These people wield attention as their superpower. What makes focused presence so transformative is its compound effect over time. Relationships researcher John Gottman discovered that couples who engage in daily attunement rituals, brief but fully present check-ins, maintain significantly higher relationship satisfaction than those who have longer but more distracted time together. Similarly, Columbia Business School found that executives who practice monotasking in meetings, no devices, full eye contact, are rated as 38% more trustworthy and competent by their teams. The magic lies in what neuroscientists call neural entrainment. When two people sync up neurologically through mutual attention, creating a shared emotional experience that forms the bedrock of lasting connection. In practical terms, this means resisting the cultural pull toward constant partial attention by implementing what psychologists call attention anchors. Physical cues like putting phones in another room during meals, closing laptops during conversations, or using specific locations, a certain chair, a walk outdoors, for important discussions. The most counterintuitive truth about attention is that it's not about time spent but quality of presence. A 2-minute conversation where someone truly listens with their whole being creates more connection than 2 hours of distracted coexistence. This explains why the Japanese practice of omotenashi, the art of selfless hospitality where the host anticipates needs before they're expressed, leaves such lasting impressions. In our personal lives, we can cultivate this same quality through what attention researchers call micro-moments of mindfulness. Pausing before responding to truly absorb what was said, resisting the urge to interrupt with our own stories, and noticing subtle emotional cues in tone and body language. When you become someone who makes others feel like they're your only priority, even briefly, you create the kind of emotional resonance that lingers long after the interaction ends. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, the person who truly listens becomes unforgettable. Chapter 13. The Legacy Lens, Crafting Relationships that Endure Beyond the Moment. The most psychologically astute individuals understand that truly meaningful relationships are not built for transactional gain, but as living legacies that grow richer over time. This long-term perspective, what sociologists call relational foresight, transforms how we approach every interaction, knowing that today's conversations become tomorrow's shared history. Neuroscience reveals that relationships maintained over decades literally rewire our brains, creating what researchers term social synapses, neural pathways that fire in sync with long-term companions even when apart. This explains why childhood friends can pick up conversations effortlessly after years of separation, or why mentors and protégés maintain invisible bonds that shape careers across generations. The magic lies in what psychologists call the endowment effect of time, the phenomenon where shared history automatically increases perceived value, making long-term relationships more resilient and rewarding than new ones, regardless of frequency of contact. In our era of disposable connections and digital acquaintances, those who master the art of relational endurance stand apart. A landmark 85-year Harvard study found that people with strong lifelong relationships weren't just happier. They lived longer, stayed sharper mentally, and even earned more over time. This relational compounding effect works much like financial investing: small, consistent deposits of genuine connection, a check-in during tough times, celebrating obscure victories, remembering important details, yield exponential returns in trust and goodwill. The most skilled relationship builders practice what anthropologists call slow connection. They resist the modern urge for instant intimacy, instead allowing trust to deepen organically through cycles of separation and reunion. Like master vintners, they understand that some bonds need time to ferment before reaching full richness. What separates fleeting connections from legacy relationships often comes down to what psychologists term the Michelangelo phenomenon: the ability to help others become their ideal selves through our perception of them. Just as Michelangelo saw the sculpture already existing in the marble, people who maintain enduring relationships hold up mirrors that reflect back others' best potentials. This explains why certain teachers live forever in students' minds, why some bosses inspire decades of loyalty, and why childhood friendships can withstand lifetimes of change. The practical application involves what memory researchers call identity reminders, periodically reflecting back to people how they've grown. Remember when you were nervous about public speaking? Now you command rooms effortlessly, or reinforcing their core values. That was so you. Standing up for what's right despite the cost. These strategic moments of recognition create what psychologists term narrative continuity, helping others see their lives as coherent stories of growth rather than disjointed episodes. The digital age presents both challenges and unprecedented opportunities for legacy relationships. While technology threatens shallow connection overload, it also enables what sociologists call dormant tie activation, the ability to rekindle meaningful relationships after years of inactivity with a single thoughtful message. The key lies in moving beyond generic social media interactions to what communication researchers term strategic personalization, using technology for highly customized touches like remembering important dates, referencing shared history, or sending relevant content with personal commentary. A former colleague might light up receiving an article with, "This made me think of that project we worked on in 2015. Your innovative approach still inspires how I tackle problems today." These time-traveling moments bridge past and present, creating relational continuity in a fragmented world. Cultivating legacy relationships requires adopting what psychologists call the redwood mindset, thinking in timescales of decades rather than days. Like the world's tallest trees whose roots intertwine underground, the most enduring connections develop invisible networks of mutual influence that surface unpredictably over time. This might manifest as maintaining a relationship garden spreadsheet to track when to reconnect with important people, creating personal traditions that anchor relationships, annual reunion trips, birthday calls, or practicing what monks call anticipatory nostalgia, imagining today's interactions as future cherished memories. In professional contexts, it involves what organizational psychologists term legacy mentoring, approaching guidance relationships with multi-generational perspective rather than immediate ROI. When we begin seeing every meaningful interaction as planting seeds for forests we may never sit under, we transform from social participants to relationship architects, building connections that outlast and outgrow us. Chapter 14, Your Personal Attraction Blueprint, Synthesizing the Science of Connection. The journey through these chapters has armed you with something far more valuable than superficial charm tricks. You now possess what psychologists call relational intelligence, the ability to navigate human connections with both skill and authenticity. This final chapter isn't about adding new concepts, but about helping you integrate everything into a personalized system that aligns with your unique personality, goals, and circumstances. Think of it as constructing your own social GPS, one that guides you through any interaction while staying true to your core identity. Neuroscience confirms that this level of integration creates what researchers term expertise-induced neuroplasticity. Your brain literally rewires itself to make these skills second nature. Much like a concert pianist's brain adapts to fluidly play complex compositions without conscious thought. The foundation of your personal blueprint begins with what organizational psychologists call strategic self-awareness, a clear-eyed understanding of your natural social strengths and growth areas. Perhaps you're instinctively great at making people feel heard but need to work on leaving lasting emotional echoes. Or maybe your authenticity shines but could benefit from more calibrated vulnerability. A powerful exercise used at Harvard Business School involves creating what they term a social portfolio, a breakdown of your relational assets, natural talents like humor or empathy, liabilities, habits like interrupting or avoiding conflict, and growth investments, skills you want to develop. This isn't about fixing flaws, but about strategically allocating your social energy where it will have highest impact. For instance, an introverted engineer might focus on mastering deep listening and strategic follow-ups rather than trying to become the life of every party. Your blueprint becomes truly powerful when you combine this self-knowledge with what behavioral scientists call situational intelligence, the ability to read different social contexts and adjust your approach accordingly. Imagine having a mental dashboard that assesses variables like power dynamics. Is this a peer or superior? Cultural norms, formal or casual? Emotional temperature, tense or relaxed? And interaction purpose, building trust or solving problems. The most socially skilled people toggle effortlessly between what psychologists term connection modes. Knowing when to be the energizer, the listener, the brainstormer, or the peacemaker. You can develop this flexibility through social scenario planning, before important interactions, mentally rehearsing different paths the conversation might take and how you'll navigate them while staying authentic. The implementation of your blueprint relies on what cognitive scientists call structured spontaneity, creating frameworks that make effective social habits automatic while leaving room for genuine connection. This might involve 1. A morning connection ritual, spending 5 minutes reviewing who you'll interact with that day and how you can add value to those exchanges. A weekly relationship audit, reflecting on which connections strengthened, which need attention, and what patterns emerged in your interactions. A feedback loop system, occasionally asking trusted colleagues or friends for input on your relational strengths and blind spots. A growth experiment each month, selecting one skill from these chapters to focus on in low-stakes situations before applying it to more important ones. What makes this approach revolutionary is that it moves beyond rigid how-to formulas into what psychologists term adaptive expertise, the ability to fluidly apply principles across diverse situations. Like a jazz musician who masters scales to improvise freely, you'll internalize these concepts to the point where they express themselves naturally through your unique personality. The end goal isn't to become someone else, but to become the most compelling version of yourself. Someone who forms connections that are both authentically you and remarkably effective. As you move forward, remember that relational skills follow what learning scientists call the 20% principle. Mastering the most impactful 20% of these techniques will give you 80% of the results. Your mission now is to identify which elements resonate most deeply with who you are and the relationships you want to build. Whether seeking deeper friendships, more influential professional connections, or more meaningful romantic relationships, your personal attraction blueprint will serve as both compass and companion, guiding you toward connections that aren't just impressive, but enduringly fulfilling. The quality of your life ultimately mirrors the quality of your relationships, and with these tools, you're now equipped to make that reflection shine.